I couldn't believe she wanted to do the movie. And I finally said to her, I said to her, why you're Maggie Smith. What are you doing here? She said, darling, I have to eat. I love that. You know, and then there were lots of things that had nothing to do with the film, but how folks were being treated. And so it was, I felt that I should be more active. And so I sort of created a little bit of, a bit of a problem for.
What happened?
For Disney. Well, just the ladies hadn't gotten everything I felt they should have gotten, the nuns, you know, because they were older women. They were women who I felt, you know, should be able to go and do, you know, have dinner and not be worried about paying hotels or whatever it was. And so I said, well, let's see if I can help work this out for you, because I think this is doable. And so we had a little shutdown for a day or two. And then we were back, and then it was okay. And then
you went on strike.
I got sick. I would never go on strike, but my coughing and sneezing coincided with our brief problem, but they fixed it and it was great.
And then we
you know, you tell
in
us
one of those hotel rooms, and we ordered wine and fries, as one does in a nun's outfit, and we ordered room service. I don't know if you know this. And the room service came up, and right before it came up, I put porn on the TV, and we were both in our nun's outfits. And I said to her, don't you change it, don't you change it. And so he came in, and I said, no, come in a little further, roll it in, roll the tray in, roll it on.
And
it was fun.
And this gal, she had parked me sitting on the edge of the bed just watching, like this.
Oh my
The guy who came in was a ginger with really young kid with really pale skin. It was perfect. It was central casting. Right. It was, and she said that she'd pay me $100 if I didn't laugh, and I lost.
I will follow him wherever he may go. not harmonized it up. There isn't an ocean too deep. A mountain. I can't continue.
I thought you were gonna do the Hey Girls.
You were gonna do Hail Girls.
Hail girls.
Hail Mary.
What's up? That's such a good. If I was ever in a convent, that's how I would address everyone. That would be my hello. Hail girls. Hail Mary. What's up?
Famously, yes, how nuns talk all the time. That's their thing.
But it's also funny. The funniest. It's a great joke. First of all, Hail Mary is funny because of the reference to Hail Mary. But
what?
Also, it's funny because all of the nuns' names are Mary something in this movie, which is so funny to me. Oh man, what a time. Well, that covers opening banter, I guess.
Mary is also famously my real name. So
That's true.
Hail Mary.
Hail
What
Mary.
is
It was a huge deal when we all found out in college that Molly was
mid-second semester freshman year.
Every friend group I've ever made, there's some day where they find out that my legal name is Mary and they feel betrayed. And I have no plans to change anything about how I deliver that news. I thoroughly enjoy that day.
Sister Mary Grace.
Sister Mary Grace.
Now, Molly, if you did want to go into a convent, you have the name. That's a great nun name already. Unlock.
I don't know if people know that I'm Catholic, but I feel like when I tell them that the names of the siblings of my family are Mary, Margaret, and Joseph, it gives us away as to our cultural background.
Yeah. Muslim. Great. RJ, this week you are tasked.
I do notice that there is a new spreadsheet on our notes.
Spreadsheet linked.
I grew tired of having to go back to old documents to figure out who to do the summary, so I've created a spreadsheet with the next 40 episodes patterned out so that we know who's going to do the summary.
RJ, you have 1 minute to tell me the plot of the 1992 Runaway Smash Sister Act, and your time starts now.
Dolores Van Cartier is a lounge singer who is tired of her relationship with Reno gangster and casino owner Vince LaRocca. She tries to tell him off when she happens to walk in on him taking care of an informant, if you know what I mean. Pew! After telling the police, they put her in under witness protection until they can get a court date and put an end to LaRocca's crimes, which is at a convent in San Francisco, the last place she would ever be spotted. She struggles to fit into nun life, but befriends the other nuns. Isn't that nice?
Life.
After getting caught sneaking to a bar, the Reverend Mother's punishment is for Mary Clarence, that's her nun name, to join their very tone-deaf choir. With her previous singing experience, the nuns make Mary Clarence the new choir director, and with it, shifts their sound to more of the soulful Motown sound she loves to perform. The new sound brings new attention to the church, connects them to their community, and even piques the interest of the Pope in his U.S. visit. But with it also reveals her identity, and Mary Clarence is found out and kidnapped to be dealt with. At the end, with another helicopter scene, both the Reno police and the nuns of St. Catherine's Convent save Dolores. Vince is arrested, and the choir performs for good old Johnny P at the church.
JP2.
And that's what you missed on Sister Act.
Amazing job.
Well
RJ.
over a minute. Congratulations.
Hey,
But so much more concise than almost any of the other summaries he's done.
I have really listened back and really worked on my craft of summarizing. So
the craft. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate you feeling called in and really working on yourself, doing the self-work required.
Thank you so much. You know, we grow.
We grow, we learn, we
living
develop.
our best life.
Yeah. So I did not grow up watching this movie because we owned the VHS to the sequel.
Oh.
And so for most of my childhood, I don't think I realized that the sequel was a sequel because I just didn't understand how that worked until I want to say I was 10 or 11. And then I think it was on TV and I was like, what's happening? And then mom explained that it was the first one. And so in the sequel, when she does she does the movie, but on stage, that was actually referencing the first movie. And I was my mind was blown. So I haven't seen this movie as many times, but I have seen it a bunch and it's a absolute classic.
So you were around 12 when you first watched this one?
Yeah, 10 to 12-ish. Yeah.
But I feel like the second movie is so of a piece with the first movie.
Yeah.
No, your experience of it is still as a young child because it's not the second movie is a different type of experience. You had the Sister Act experience.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because
just in a different setting. I feel like it's more set to a child because it's
she is a kid.
She's with kids. Yeah.
Right. I do think that, and I don't know if we're ever going to do Sister Act 2, but
I hope so.
I hope so for next year, honey.
for next week. No, I'm just kidding. I do think though that like Sister Act 2, it's interesting to put those two together because I think a lot of the times sequels just try to do the same kind of plot but with different characters.
Mhm.
And like Sister Act 1 and Sister Act 2 have the exact same themes, obviously, but like the movie plot lines are like completely different. Like there's
Definitely.
no like corollary anything, which is really cool, but that's not what we're here to talk about. RJ, what was your you grew up Catholic, so I'm sure you knew a nun or two, and you love Motown very famously.
Yes. So this was a high rotation of my rewatching when I was like around like middle school. So I remember growing up, we had video CDs, which you're probably like, oh, a DVD. No, it's a VCD, which was kind of like the precursor to DVD, in between the VHS and DVD era. That was really only popular in Southeast Asia because it was like a cheaper way to create, because you just, burn that into a CD disc. So every movie always came in like part 1 and part 2 for the most part, if it's like, a standard like 2-ish hour movie. But I had like a huge collection because my mom and my dad just loved having all these movies, and this was definitely one of them. And so I watched this a ton during like the summers, during like middle school, elementary school, middle school. So there's that. There's also the fact that my mom has told me many times that if she didn't meet my dad and fell in love, she probably would have been a nun, because she
Wow.
really wanted to be like a nun in a choir. She like wanted to play piano. She wanted to like sing at a choir, be a singing nun. So she loved this movie. And so I just like, we always just watched it all the time. And I also like was a choir boy literally for my entire childhood up until like all throughout high school too. And then, the one semester that Adam and I were madrigals in college, where we would sing in choir, would sing in mass. And so I
did that class too, but a different semester because I was not in it with you.
It was we did it as our last semester.
Yeah.
It was like the last musical theater.
We were together. Yeah.
So I always felt like I had a kindred connection with that. And also, like Adam said, I love Motown. My dad would like take me to like Motown like clubs. I mean, obviously they were more like, just like concert or like, like loungy.
And like tribute Temptation group. Concerts.
Yes. My dad is a huge fan of like Motown tribute shows and stuff. So I remember watching them all the time. So
I loved the way you phrased that as if he's not a fan of Motown. He's only a fan of
Motown
tributes.
Exactly. Because the Vegas ones, but he doesn't know who the Temptations are.
You have CDs that are only of cover bands of Motown.
Yeah.
But your dad also like really loves disco, right?
Yes. My whole very.
And there was still like a question as to why you turned out gay. Is that what I'm?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. We had the full like ABBA discography, and for some reason they were like shocked as I was singing "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man of the Midnight" after midnight. Oh yeah. So I felt like this movie was so like connected to me and my family, like spiritually and just emotionally and everything else. So yeah.
Molly, you are a Mary legally, so and you grew up Catholic, spiritually even, literally even. Does this movie resonate to your personal experience?
This movie is a top 3 all-time favorite movie for me, just in my life. I love this movie. I love the sequel. I consider them of a piece in ranking my top 3 movies. They are together on the same tier. This movie it's the best comedy
Act
about
one
the
and
Catholic.
Act 2.
Yeah, Act 1 and Act 2. You have to get to Act 2 to get to the giant and the really serious themes.
Cheryl Lee Ralph plays the giant.
It just like it's such a good representation of what is funny about growing up Catholic to me. It's like a really funny movie. It's also wholesome though. Like it never to me feels like Catholics are being made fun of. It's like having fun with you.
Yeah.
But also does point out some of the stuff that I also don't like about the church. So like I guess it needles a little bit, but on all the right places to me. Whoopi Goldberg is so funny in it. I also went to a high school that was in a convent. So the nun experience is one that I feel like I've felt the nun experience on a more intimate level than many Catholics my age, because I actually went to high school with nuns, although they weren't teachers, only because all of them were too old they had all retired from teaching. So they were just sort of like around. There was a nun who like sold us popcorn after school. And there was one that played in the orchestra, the violin and stuff. So they were just like characters around the school for me. And they were so sweet.
Did they wear habits?
They wore
or do they do like the like very like kind of modern, just the like what like a plain with like a collary type moment thing?
Yeah, it was much more plain.
Necklace.
It was like honestly mostly just sort of like conservative regular streetwear. I don't even know that they had like a uniform of any kind. I'm realizing now that I'm out of practice with like the parlance of exactly what you call different things.
It always feels like nuns who don't wear like a habit are wearing like a sweatshirt with a button down underneath and the collar's coming out.
Yeah. There's a lot of like sweaters and like to the floor jean skirts was kind of the look.
See, when I think jean skirts, I think like the Pentecostal kids.
Yeah, that's true. But it's not a Catholic thing, I feel like, unless you're a nun. You know what I mean? But the Pentecostals are wearing it like every day to the grocery store.
Yeah. Not cutting their hair. We're doing the things. God bless everybody.
We love it.
God bless Kurt. So this movie is very interesting. This movie is directed by Emile Ardolino, who directed like the sequel to Three Men and a Baby, which is like Three Men and a Baby Girl, which was like not good. He just did like generic late 80s comedies. It's written by Paul Rudnick, but the credit goes to Joseph Howard. I'm going to just hold off on that for just a moment.
So excited to talk about this.
It is produced by Scott Rudin and Terry Schwartz. Scott Rudin, who famously is like semi-canceled, just like not a great guy.
Wait, why? I don't know this. Why is he semi-canceled?
So Scott Rudin is like a super famous Broadway producer and like movie producer. And there was like in 2021 or 2020, there was a lot of like I don't think any of it was like sexual misconduct, but it was like he like literally verbally and like physically has abused his like employees, but like his assistants and stuff. Okay. And he's just like a really shitty dude in general.
Gotcha.
So he's also producing the current Music Man on Broadway. So shout out to him. It stars Whoopi Goldberg as Dolores Van Cartier, Maggie Smith as Reverend Mother, and Harvey Keitel as Vince LaRocca. I did not realize that this was Harvey Keitel until I was looking this up, and I was like, oh, like Martin Scorsese's Harvey Keitel. Got it. Okay. The cinematography is by Adam Greenberg. It is edited by Colleen Halsey and Richard Halsey. The music is by Mark Shaman, who goes on to do Hairspray. So there's music being, he mostly did like the arrangements of the like songs. The production companies are Touchstone Pictures, Touchwood Pacific, and Partners One. It is distributed by Buena Vista Pictures. So Disney, that's just Disney. Touchstone was owned by Disney. It's released on May 29th, 1992. Its runtime is 100 minutes long. Its budget was $31 million. So like super budgeted. This is like the mid budget comedy that like the Hollywood just really does not make anymore. Like Netflix is the only place like making these. These are what I miss about the 90s is this kind of comedy. And its box office was $231.6 million, which is why it gets a sequel the next year. The next calendar year, there is a sequel. Amazing.
It's so nice when like a movie that you loved also was like, it also did well. Oh, thank God. Like, it wasn't just like because I loved it because it was so endearing to me. It's like, oh, it was beloved. Thank God.
Yeah, 1992 is a real wild time for just movies in general because there's just like a lot of like huge classics that like we just think of today as like a 90s classic is in this year. So in the top 5 for that week, we have Encino Man at number 5, Far and Away at number 4, Alien 3 is number 3, Sister Act debuted at number 2, and Lethal Weapon 3 was number 1. But if I had included all 10, there was like Beauty and the Beast, I'm forgetting them now, but like 3 other movies that I was literally like, how did these all come out at the same time? Like these are just all so good. Also, Beauty and the Beast, crazy. I know we're not talking about this, but you know I have to mention it. Beauty and the Beast technically came out in 1991, and this week I looked it up. It was its 29th week in the top 10.
Wow.
And I was like, that also just doesn't happen anymore. That's not a thing. Movies stay around for like a month and a half, and then they're done. Unless obviously it's Greatest Showman. And then,
they'll play
and then
one
it's going
showing
from December until July.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, because it's the greatest movie ever made.
It's the greatest story ever told.
I'm curious about your speculation about like, why do you think people love this movie so much? Because it can't just be Catholics buying tickets to see it. Do we think it's because enough of it resonates with other Christian experiences that like everybody gets it, or just like there's enough Catholic iconography that people kind of get the church enough to like have the baseline to understand it?
I almost wonder if it's just Whoopi's power. They know that she is funny and like she's done a lot of these movies and
yeah, so she's directly coming off of her win for Ghost. So she had just won the Academy Award for Oda Mae Brown in Ghost in 1990. Technically the award was presented in 1991. So that was super recent. She also has just like this is like the 90s when she was like
a comedy everywhere.
The moment.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting. I think mostly though, I think this movie is just very it really does well in being technically a high concept film. And I don't mean like it's hard to understand, but like a lounge singer who sees a murder, so goes into witness protection in a convent and changes which is that alone could have been the plot. And then she turns the church choir into like a doo-wop group. Like that's high concept, but it's so formulaic in how it's presented as a film. Like I don't think there's any kind of like auteurness in this direction that like really is cool. So I think it's like
you're not
complex enough,
more,
but it's also basic enough that the general public can really easily like grasp it. And the comedy I think is really smart too. All the characters are great. Everyone's like a stock. It's just really fun.
Yeah.
And it like you leave it, there's no like bad, you never feel like she's gonna die. Even at the end, this whole chase sequence, you're like, there's no way they're gonna kill Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
This is crazy. But like it's fun and you don't disbelieve the stakes, but I don't know. I think it's just like all around like a crowd pleaser.
Yeah. This time, am I allowed to recommend the movie? Because I feel like I've gotten in trouble before for getting too far ahead of myself with recommending it.
This is a 6 thumbs up from the 3 of us. 6 thumbs way up.
This might be the most consensus we've ever had about a movie, actually.
Yeah.
Probably,
have we ever logged into a call and unanimously all of us think it's a
well, we all
movie?
unanimously didn't like Annie 2014.
We all know
that's true.
Yeah, we all hated Dear Evan Hansen.
Okay,
we all liked Meet Me in St. Louis, and we all liked Guys and Dolls.
Okay, yeah.
And we hated Annie.
I think that maybe this level of approval and being unanimous is probably a first.
And also had like it was already beloved by us.
Right, we grew up with it. So there's also the huge nostalgia factor for this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the writing of this film, and I'll Molly, you can tag in also. But I did want to just say, I mentioned that this movie is credited to a Joseph Howard, a person who does not exist. Well, now I'm sure there's a person named Joseph Howard, but that is not a person who wrote this movie.
In the world, yeah.
The original script was written by Paul Rudnick, who is actually about to do the book for the Devil Wears Prada musical, which is the Elton John musical happening this year. But that is not why we're here to talk about it. This original script came to Disney, it got greenlit, and then it went through like 6 passes for script doctors. So if you don't know, a script doctor is like a person who just punches up jokes basically on comedies typically. And these are the script doctors for this movie. Carrie Fisher, the Carrie Fisher, Robert Harling, who wrote Steel Magnolias, Nancy Myers, who's directed every white woman's dream fantasy movie, Eleanor Bergstein, who wrote Dirty Dancing, and Jim Cash, who wrote Top Gun. Like, all of these people have hands in this movie, and I would almost want to be like, I can kind of see the like Jim Cash, Eleanor Bergstein thing with kind of them like trying. There's not real and overt romance between like the lieutenant and Dolores, but there's not a romance. Like they have this like kind of like flirtatious thing. But then you also like Carrie Fisher, and apparently Whoopi hired Carrie to like punch up all of her specific dialogue. Which I love that. And like Carrie Fisher, like famously is uncredited on a lot of movies that she had a hand in like script doctoring because she was like so beloved in the community and like was so good at it. But the reason it's not credited to Paul Rudnick is because he was so like annoyed that so many people had like done passes on his movie that he originally was like, well, it's not even my movie. And they're like, well, we're still going to, you still have it's your original script. So he was like, okay, but I wanted it credited to Goofy. He literally was like, say Goofy wrote it. And they were like, well, we're not going to do that. So then he came up with Joseph Howard, which is like his middle name and his brother's name or something like that. Something dumb. But that's why it's like kind of weird.
That's so weird. So just
and he also has like written a bunch of comedies too. None of them are like as successful as this one is.
So it's almost it was like purely just pride. Like he's like, I don't want my name to be associated with a script that so many other people had to like punch up.
It didn't say like what his specific reasoning for like being frustrated was. I mean, I guess it could feel, I don't know. I'm sure, yeah, probably pride. But also like maybe like I don't want people to think I'm this good. I'm like set your expectations low. I don't know.
I mean, when you list that collection of people who script doctored it, it's like, yeah, just get those people in a room again to write another perfect movie. Like, how could you ever recreate this experience
I know.
to get this?
It's so crazy.
But yeah, I researched him because I was really interested, because I was like, surely this has to have been written by somebody who has like a deep Catholic experience. Nope. And so I looked him up for that reason. But I also couldn't find anything about like why he like, was it like I don't like the movie anymore? Or it just like I just feel like it's not fair for me to take credit. I don't know. But he's from a Jewish family, so I assume he identifies as Jewish. But this is from Wikipedia, y'all. I'm turning in my dissertation in 2 days. I only have limited time. So I assume he identifies as Jewish and was openly gay. So that was not the perspective that I was expecting because some research I did for this episode was on like the way that Catholic music changed. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, this has to be somebody like remembering this shift from their childhood and like thinking about music is like really important to the Catholic identity. Nope. Not in any way. But I am fascinated by his life. He wrote a play in 1998 called The Most Fabulous Story Ever Told, which was taken from the like dig of like, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And so he just wrote a play where it is Adam and Steve and has the first lesbian couple of Jane and Mabel. And he also wrote a movie in 2020, which I feel like I can't watch right now because it's called Socially Distanced, and I need 5 years to reflect back on it. But let me read you the cast of this movie: Bette Midler, Dan Levy, Issa Rae, Sarah Paulson, Caitlin Dever.
Wow!
If anyone could assemble a cast that I need to watch, it is that. So I just think he sounds amazing, and I was like really surprised that I had never heard of any of his work because I feel like his comedy is right up my alley and he likes all the same actors that I do. So
Well, so the director was also gay, Emile Ardolino. He also directed Dirty Dancing. And he directs he died actually from complications due to AIDS in like 1993, the year after this is released. So that's very sad. But his last movie is Gypsy, which also starred Bette Midler. And Bette Midler was originally supposed to be Dolores Van Cartier in this film.
Wow.
So while Paul Rudnick was like writing the screenplay, I guess this is like the late 80s, so it had been in development for a few years, but she had suggested that he should like go to an actual convent to do some research. So he went to the Regina Laudis Abbey in Bethlehem, Connecticut, and the prioress was a Mother Dolores Hart, who was a younger woman who she had once been an actress, like a singer and a dancer, and she was in King Creole, which is an Elvis movie, and in the beach romance Where the Boys Are from 1960. And she was apparently Mother Hart is still the only known nun to be a voting member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and she and her fellow nuns enjoy watching her Academy screeners every year.
Oh,
I love that.
cool.
But then this gets into the controversy around this film, which is, where is the story? So in 1993, the year after this movie was released, Donna Douglas, who had formerly been one of the stars of the Beverly Hillbillies in the 60s and 70s, she owned a publishing company at this point, and she owned the rights to a book called A Nun in the Closet. And they had submitted a screenplay adaptation of this book to Disney twice in the late 80s. And Disney like had passed on it both times, and then they came out with this movie, and apparently it's very similar in it's like a nun who goes or a woman who goes into hiding in a convent and blah 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 blah. So like a similar plot, story structure, stuff like that. They tried to settle, but they didn't want to settle, and so the judge ended up siding with Disney, so they didn't get anything. And later they were quoted as, the losing side was quoted as being like, basically the only way we were going to win is if the dialogue was like matched what was in the book. But then in 2012 there was a book called The Harlem Street Nun, which is Delois. How would you say this name? Delois.
Where is it?
Delois. Delois. It's under the section of the notes called Plagiarism Controversy.
Oh, I see. Delois? I would be my guess.
Probably Delois. Okay, so Delois Blakely is a nun who wrote an autobiography called The Harlem Street Nun. And in 2012, she sued Disney for $1 billion in damages with a B.
Oh my gosh.
Because apparently also late 80s, she had written this book, and a movie had expressed interest in taking it and making it a screenplay. And what ended up happening with this lawsuit is that it was dismissed by the New York Supreme Court with prejudice. And with prejudice is a legal term, which means that it is a civil case, it is not allowed to come back into the court. So if it was without prejudice, there was like a technical problem with the lawsuit, so they could reapply if they just fixed what was technically wrong with the lawsuit. But because it was with prejudice, it was basically just thrown out altogether.
Interesting. I also realized as you were talking, it could be Delois, because Lois is a name, so it might be that. Yeah.
Yeah, Delois.
Lois is actually my aunt's name.
Oh, great.
So I thought that was very interesting, because I think that does seem like, what is the genesis of this script? Now, I love the idea that it's just the idea of a movie called Sister Act, and then you work backwards from there, because
it does not seem impossible to get there from that notion.
Because the title being, is there a better title in movie history?
In the world?
Honestly.
There is only one city, it is New York City, and there's only one title for movies, and it is Sister Act.
So yeah, so those were just some interesting facts. And then the original director was supposed to be Pedro Almodovar, which is very interesting because I think that would have been a very different film from the one we got. And the once they changed it to Whoopi Goldberg, the city changed from Chicago to San Francisco because that's where Whoopi started her stand-up career. So that's why that shifted. And then at the Golden Globes, this was nominated for Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy and Best Actress in a Motion Picture Musical or Comedy for Whoopi Goldberg, but neither won.
Unconscionable. I can't believe this is a movie for a Golden Globe if ever one's existed.
That's all I have. We can go on. We can move on to
talk about the film.
The film.
The film.
So I didn't really take notes. I started taking notes and then I kind of was like, I've seen this movie so many times I could do this with my eyes closed. But I think the thing I really want to say in regards to this movie is that I don't believe that it technically is a movie musical. I think it is a movie with music, and I think it is a musical movie. An adjective, a musical movie, but not a movie musical.
I feel that you're technically correct, but I won't apologize for putting it on our podcast.
Not at all. We could do an entire podcast of just like movies like this where there's like maybe a song or two sung by a person, which also happens to be a lot of Bette Midler's career in the late 80s was just like, because she was a singer, she's like in a wacky comedy. And it's zany and kooky, and then she sings a song out of nowhere for no good
First
and
Wives Club.
reason.
There is a full musical number.
First Wives Club.
Like full musical music number.
Yes.
It's not like
Steel Magnolias wrote First Wives Club.
Ah.
He also wrote Soap Dish.
Ah, great.
One of the great gays of our time.
Just zany gay comedies.
Anyway, that was all I had to say. I'm not mad that we did this movie, and I'm so glad we're talking about it, but I want to point out that if we were going
for
back
all the
to the rules that
out
Molly came up with, which was if it's a movie that has song performances, that doesn't necessarily count. So by Molly's own admission.
It is not a musical. It's not a movie musical. It has become a musical since this.
That is true, yeah. For sure.
Which I've never seen, but I would love to see.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's all diegetic music.
Yeah. In scene, sung by real people.
Right.
In the moment. Yeah. But still great. Nailed it. 10 out of 10. No notes.
One of the big things that when we first started watching the movie last night was in the opening number with the Ronells, which is like,
oh my God.
I just want to talk about like the full comedy of the scene because everything it's so smart. It's so specific. It is Whoopi Goldberg and her two singers. One of them is Jennifer Lewis.
Jennifer
by the way.
Lewis is in this movie.
Black Hollywood legend. Wild. Jennifer Lewis. But the fact that they are singing to like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people at a Reno casino. They are just like background music.
Reno.
That it's Reno. The comedy that it's Reno, not even Vegas. And they're doing like a full Motown medley. Like
of 3 songs.
And you know that they like she must have picked these songs. She had someone record.
That's where half of this $30 million budget went, was just getting the rights to these 3 songs so they could rearrange them, 2 of them later in this movie.
It's just like Whoopi just does so much comedic acting with like just face, body, like the side eyes that she gives the 2 singers. The like movements, the dance movements that they're doing, because they're just enough that it's like interesting, but clearly like the laziest dance like choreography and steps to the songs.
I want to say, firstly, that I, as a child, thought that Whoopi Goldberg was a singer because I only knew her from this movie. So I just like
So
assumed
you're like,
that was.
oh yes, Whoopi Goldberg
Or-
was the Beyonce. I was like a Beyonce of like, oh,
Yeah,
they got
or-
a singer.
I didn't think that she like what. I guess I didn't think she was a singer rather than an actress, but I thought she was like known for her singing. I just like assumed that was true.
Well, because that's how it would be cast today.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
I mean, she does a great job with this. Like, I don't know. It's hard for me to assess this as if I watched it for the first time.
The cigarettes hadn't
yesterday,
taken
but-
full effect yet of destroying her voice. So
But
she
there's
can still
never a
sing.
moment where you're like, oh, this person isn't believable as like she has a good enough voice to be a lounge singer in Reno, right? Like it passes for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to say is this is the one movie that I enjoy Motown music in. I know you talked earlier, Jay, about your love for it and your dad's love for it. But famously, I don't like any movie written between 1955 and 1990, but I will make an exception for this movie. So I only like Motown if it is applied to the church.
Yeah. Just relatable for me, you know. You gotta meet me.
3, I love that in this scene that the big joke is that they realize no one's paying attention, so she keeps speeding it up, which means that there is a live accompanist to this performance who is somewhere off stage. Because if they were singing to a recording, they couldn't have sped up. So someone is playing the piano faster and faster for them to do this bit.
I love it, I love it, I love it. And when he goes on, he'll always be mine. From now until forever.
Wherever he goes, baby, I go. I'm telling you the truth. No, baby, there ain't no ocean too deep. You know there ain't no mountain to keep me away. Not away from his love. That's right, baby.
I love it, I love it, I love it. And when he goes on, he'll always be mine. From now until forever.
Don't pass up this chance. I got a bracelet and a pair of pants. He waits.
It's so good. And their wigs are just
Their wigs are huge. She's so annoyed. It's just like Whoopi is so good. She has an Academy Award for a reason. She's an EGOT for a reason.
Yeah.
And
an Academy Award for a comedy, no less. Like,
yeah.
like that performance.
Yeah. A comic performance, yes. But she is so like she's just like a masterclass of watching someone do comedy.
Yeah.
Like when she got to come on Drag Race and like give notes on like how to like do those like one woman shows or whatever. Because that's like kind of how she started, was doing like
storytelling type
stand up. It wasn't like set up punchline, but she's so specific in her like choices that she makes and like the movements she does, and everything is like on a beat and you can like feel her rhythm of like joke delivery. It's so funny. She is phenomenal in this movie. I don't think everyone in this movie matches what she's giving, but like her, Maggie Smith, Kathy Najimy are like just like stars in this movie. The guy who plays Eddie, the lieutenant, is like
fine. Says the line.
Serviceable.
Yeah.
He's serviceable. He's performing that role.
I like him a lot. I mean, I guess I wouldn't put him on par with Whoopi, but he's kind of a hottie, and I also like that they have like a connection, but they don't push it into a romance. Like I like that they just kind of, you can tell they just kind of like each other, and like that's all that needs to happen.
It's very reminiscent of like the 90s like black sitcom, like playful romance,
banter,
like banter and like chemistry. Like it's very like living singly like type of like chemistry.
Yeah, it also like really keeps it appropriate that like he's a cop that's responsible for keeping her alive. So like would be pretty inappropriate for them to get together. So I like that there's like no nobody needs to act on this, but
Yeah.
like we know that like we like each other. I think that's cute.
I think in the musical they make it more
Yeah,
overt.
they're like a thing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But you gotta stretch it out to 2 acts. So.
Gotta make it hetero for Broadway.
But that's why that's a musical and this isn't, because there's not
That's
a love
the only
story.
thing- that's the metric.
That's the definitive metric. Can we talk about Maggie Smith in this movie?
I do want to talk about Maggie Smith. I just want to have one more comment about the opening scene, which is that he gives her this amazing coat to like say, I'm sorry that I'm not going to leave my wife. Her boyfriend gives her an amazing coat, but she figures out that it's his wife's coat because there's a monogram.
A giant monogram.
In the coat. So this woman received a coat and then put her initials inside of the coat. And this is not a thing I knew that rich people did, but apparently
It did for the comedy.
It's also a purple fur.
It's so pretty though. I would be happy to have that coat.
But the like fur that she already has, I was like, you have an actual gorgeous like fur. I thought that was very funny.
I'd rather have the purple fur.
But I also liked that it was like, well, she's a lounge singer in Reno, so of course she wants the purple fur.
Yeah. My favorite.
Molly, future lounge singer in Reno.
Absolutely. This is what I've been aiming for. I did the doctorate to get my way into the Reno lounge.
It's the arena scene.
It's what's the word for it? Never mind. Competitive. The Reno market is so competitive. I needed a doctorate to get it.
Irony of you forgetting the word competitive. He's very like quick on his feet, kind of. Yeah.
My favorite costuming detail, Adam pointed it out yesterday because I didn't see it before, was she wears like a bracelet made out of mahjong tiles, which honestly work.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
It's great.
And Jennifer Lewis is wearing like dice earrings. It's just, of course, what in Reno?
They fit so much costuming into that first scene because they know they're not going to have any.
Literally put everything on them because they will be wearing the same thing for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. But yes, so when we get to the convent, which was shot at a Roman Catholic church in San Francisco, which is pretty cool.
Great.
Because at first I was like, this has got to be like LA. Like this has got to be some dumb church in LA that they were like down the street from. But I did like that they actually went to San Francisco and filmed. But when they get to the convent and you meet Maggie Smith, this was my first introduction to Maggie Smith as a child. And
yeah,
I still I am still not so versed in my like older films that are like non-musicals. And Maggie Smith has, I think, been nominated like 5 times for an Academy Award. Like, and I've never seen any of her nominated films. I've literally seen, this is gross. I'm going to sound like a gross American. I have seen Sister Act 1 and 2. I've seen all the Harry Potters, and I've seen Downton Abbey. And that is my Maggie Smith experience.
I would add,
and it's still great.
I would just add the Secret Garden, the Disney Secret Garden from like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh yeah. Oh, and she's in Hook too, but that's also another one. That's
yeah.
That's not. That's not an Academy Award nominated film.
I think I may have only seen the same films that you have out. I'm trying to think about, even as a person who's watched a lot of British movies, I don't know that I've ever seen any like actually good Maggie Smith movies.
Yeah. But she's so funny in this. And she's
God,
dry.
It's so good.
It's the classic like 1 and 2, or like the straight man and the funny man, and she's just so dry in this movie, and it's such a good foil to everything that like not just Whoopi, honestly, but like all the nuns are throwing at her. But like it's so good. Every time they cut to her for like an arched brow, it's so funny.
She's so lovable, even though she's the villain of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like they play it so perfectly where you want her position to not win, but you never like don't like her really,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
not on a deep level.
Yeah.
Also, she was only 58 when this movie was filmed, which is, I
So
think,
crazy.
why I can never believe that Maggie Smith is still with it. I mean, I'm so glad, but like,
Yeah.
because I was like, but you were like,
Imagine Molly, by the
102
time
when I
from
was a
the time we
child.
record to the time this comes out, she's died. So we have to
Oh,
like
no!
release a statement to be like, we apologize. We recorded this a month and a half.
But yes,
ago."
fully like she's been 80 since like the first time we've seen her. So.
Exactly, which is like so wild. I
'Cause
guess
all we
so
saw
she,
was her face. We
Yes,
didn't see
that's
any of her
partially
body.
she also has Graves' disease and had to like go through treatment, I guess, before this. So I think it might have also been like health conditions made her look older than she was. But gosh,
And they made
what a
her run
career.
around Reno. Oh my god.
Also, yes, filmed in Reno too, that entire sequence, which is so funny. And then I read this crazy thing that like when they were in Reno, that not a lot of the nuns would like walk around in habits to like fuck with people in Reno and like go around to the different casinos and like in costume to like mess with people. And Kathy and Jimmy and Wendy McKenna, who
yeah.
plays Sister Mary Robert, the like postulant. They were like staying in a hotel room together, I guess, while they were shooting in Reno. And so they decided to pull this prank on the hotel staff. So they ordered room service. They turned porn on the TV, had Wendy McKenna sit transfixed, like watching the TV in horror, and have the guy like bring the stuff into the room. And then like she ended up like laughing and like revealing that it wasn't like real or whatever. And I guess they had bet each other $100, and so Wendy McKenna lost the bet because she like couldn't keep it together.
She broke it and told them what happened. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
It's so funny.
The joke, the buckwheat Bertha reference to the sex worker that she makes. The when they're like, what's the 1, 2, 3 where they're like, it's better than this, it's better than this, and she goes, it's better than sex.
Yes.
So I've heard, so I've been told.
Yeah, it's like it's better than ice cream. It's better than whatever. It's better than
Yeah.
from what I've heard.
Amazing. I love that people were having fun while filming this and like pulling pranks on people.
That
It's
was,
everything
like,
I want to hear.
Truly, the chase scene in Reno was like it was just funny. If it was just like a drone shot or like a top level shot, the entire sequence, it would have just been hilarious like that. Just watching little habits running around.
Just running around. I wrote down, I love that our culture has come to unanimous decision that nuns are a comedic beloved figure and priests are horror monsters.
Priests are terrible.
These are terrible.
Because even if nuns are like super strict and like, you know, like hit you with their rulers, it's still like there's still something like funny about it.
Even in the sequel, the priest is the villain. Father Crisp is the villain of the movie, but it's the other male characters that they
like the friars
use are like the friars, which are like also funny comedic characters because they're not as like dangerous.
Well, I will say I think the one flaw that this movie has is that the Monsignor is kind of like a benevolent paternalistic figure, and we got to upend those gender hierarchies in the church. I don't like that he comes in and he like is on Dolores' side.
Yeah.
Because Mother Superior should be in charge.
It's her convent.
It's her convent. But I
remember,
do,
is Monsignor, this is a dumb question because we don't use that term in the Episcopal Church. Is it above like what is?
I think they're above bishops.
Oh wow.
Maybe not.
I've never been. I have never
below cardinal, above bishop.
I think so. Now that you
it would
say
be
that,
below.
I think
It would be below
closer to
cardinal for sure.
Yeah.
Because cardinal is like you get to vote for the pope. That's like real business.
Yeah, that's democracy in action.
If there's one model we can look to for true democracy, it is the Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church.
It's the chimney. That's the model we're looking at.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Googling. Monsignor.
Live Googling.
Oh, okay. This says, according to Britannica, it's a title that you can
It's
give
just a
to people
title.
who are patriarchs, archbishops, and bishops. So he probably was a bishop, and they're calling him Monsignor.
Okay. It's just the title. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of like a useless character, honestly.
Yeah, he doesn't do much.
The
I don't wanna talk
frustrating
about
thing
him.
is like because they said it like in the church, not in the school. The sequel is set in because it's like set in the church. He has to be the one to lead the service because women famously can't lead Catholic services still in 2022. Bow, 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 bow. So good for them. And that is why he's in this film. It's just so you could believe that there's a mass happening because someone had to lead it. They had to be a guy.
Yeah. I just want to say on the topic of priests as horror monsters that everyone should watch Midnight Mass.
Oh yeah.
I'm not a big we've established on this podcast that I guess I have a better stomach for horror than I thought because I am the strongest stomach of the three of us, but I'm not a big horror person. I don't think it gets all that scary. And if you grew up Catholic, oh man, that taps into some deep aspects of the Catholic experience via a priest being a vampire. So sorry, spoilers. Yes.
I knew he was something.
Yeah.
Something was going on there.
He's a priest, isn't he?
He's a priest.
He's a vampire, isn't he? Well, speaking of the service, let's listen to Hail Holy Queen. The
debut.
The debut song for the Sisterelles.
Mater, mater, inter marata, sanctus, sanctus Dominus, Virgo respice mater, aspice, sanctus, sanctus Dominus. Our life, our sweetness here below, oh Maria, our hope in sorrow and in hope, oh Maria, triumph for the cherubim, sing with us, ye seraphim, heaven and earth resound the hymn. Salve, 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 Regina, salve, Regina, salve, Regina.
I'm just gonna end up doing all 4 songs in this movie because there's only 4 songs in this movie, so I'll just sprinkle them in throughout the conversation.
I love and talking about the beginnings of the choir becoming impressive, that I love the scene where she coaches them and she gives notes to 2 people. One person she says, you're singing too high, and the other one she says, you're not singing loud enough, and then the entire choir is fixed.
Yeah, she says like you have to listen to each other and then that's it. It's fixed. I'm like,
oh, if only I knew that.
I feel like if I was just given that note of like you have to listen to each other, I don't know. I feel like you would be explain how that works. Like I'm listening to them. Do I have like explain to me how blending works? Like do I have to? I don't know. Like I don't know.
I don't come to this movie for believability. I'm just gonna tell you right off the bat. That's not what I'm here for. Genuinely the only thing that like bumped me plot wise was how easily they figured out which cop was like the informant, which one was the leak. Yeah. Because literally there's like a document delivered. He looks at the document. Eddie realizes that the document was delivered to the guy. And then he walks in and just punches him. And I was like, oh, there's no, I mean, I don't need it because we'll just keep this plot a chugging. I don't really care.
It just felt like it could have been fixed with like one line.
A line. Any line, maybe.
Because I think it was meant to be like, oh, he said that you were gone for the day. And that was what tipped him off. I'm like, but he even was like, yeah, I was leaving and I left something. Like that was.
It was very strange.
Whatever.
But who cares?
Who cares? I love that the Reno Police Department has $10,000 to donate to a church as a thank you for putting this woman in witness protection.
Oh,
also traveling from Reno to San Francisco, like what, every week? Like he is checking in on her.
I looked a little bit into witness protection, by the way, and it technically they do not do this. This is like they will never do this because it's so risky for like the church or other services like whatever.
But that's what they put on the website. I don't know.
Right, that's what they put on the witness protection website. witnessprotection.gov.co.uk.
Where they definitely aren't is at a convent. Don't look there.
Yeah.
Convents are entirely peopled by folks who are in the witness protection program. That's
there
there
are actually no nuns. Nuns
there
don't
are no
exist
nuns anymore. I mean,
Okay.
we're headed in that direction.
Well, since we're on the topic of nuns, we have many nuns in this film. We don't have all of them named, obviously.
Assume they're all Marys.
Assume they're all Mary somethings. If we were to go around and each say our favorite nun, I am bringing this up, so I'll go first so I can give you time to think about who your option is. Mine is Alma. She plays the piano. She cannot hear. It's extremely funny. She's so cute. I really don't like infantilizing older people, but like this woman is so cute. I can't tell if she's actually like she could actually be like hard of hearing. I have no idea. I think she's great. In every scene she's in, she's great. She's in the montage sequence. She has a little bit. It's great. Love it.
Alma.
No notes, Alma. Marry Alma.
I don't know what her name is, and I feel bad. I'm sure it's somewhere in my brain, but the choir director.
Mary Lazarus.
Sister Mary Lazarus, the cold water, bare feet. Those were nuns. I love her
in Vancouver
so much. She's so funny. And this actress has such an iconic career to me because the two movies she's been in that I know of are White Christmas and this movie. And in both she is comedic gold.
Yes.
And like what a two films to cement that you will live forever in everyone's minds. So yeah, she's definitely my fave.
Also in the when they sing My God.
Yeah.
She like turns the wrong way. That was like an actual mistake.
Oh my God, amazing.
Which is so cute. But she's great. She's also in another one of a movie you've seen, but you probably didn't maybe not have realized because it's an animated film. She's one of the gargoyles in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, that's
I think
cool.
it was like I think it's her last credit because I think she died like the next year. She passed away the next year or something, but it's very
cool.
She
gave us many laughs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Kathy Najimy, right? For me, it's gotta be
so
Sister Mary Patrick,
So
Kathy Najimy. It's just like it was when she was doing this that I was like, she is literally like, this is what like Disney girls, like when they first work at Disney World. Like this is how they're like, Molly.
This
like,
is a
literally.
Christmas gay right here.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Buys the entire like set, the miniature set.
There is something about there are so many good one-liners in this movie, and not even like set up punchline, but just like descriptor one-liners. The one where she's like, I was so whatever she says, like I was so like hyperactive or whatever as a kid that my mother said there was only one thing I was gonna do when I grew up. I was gonna be a nun or a stewardess. Coffee.
When she asks for $1 for the jukebox, and then she was like, I'll promise they'll come back to you tenfold.
This movie is such a study in characterization because the two main nuns that Clarence hangs out with, which are Sister Mary Roberts and Sister Mary
Patrick.
Sister Mary Patrick,
Mm-hmm.
both of them essentially are like continually upbeat, nice ladies.
Yes, it's like two sides of the same like type of character. Yeah,
but they're totally different characters. And I feel like when people feel like it's hard to like differentiate characters, I'm like, if Sister Act can have this many versions of being a nun, it's not like any of the other nuns are like secretly bad or whatever, because that's Whoopi's job, is to like bring a little sin into the convent.
Right.
So like all of them are like they're there to be nuns. They like are into the whole thing, but they're all totally different people.
Yeah,
and it's so
yeah.
great.
There's also the nun, shout out to my honorable mention, which is the nun who plays the slots while they're running around the casino.
Yep.
And the Reverend Mother catches her, and then she like looks back at one of the other nuns and like grins, like as the shit-eating
But
grin
she
for
also
like
then
half a
just
second.
she just shrugs. She wins a bunch of money and then she shrugs and just walks away.
Yeah,
she just like doesn't.
She
She
took
doesn't want
about
the money.
poverty.
She just
Yeah.
wants to know that she could win
won.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny. There's so many good moments in this movie. The entire sequence when they're like trying to guilt the Catholic guilt
Oh my God.
over the pilot.
That is the funniest scene I think I've ever seen put to film. When they are praying over him. Oh my God.
To guilt him to take him all on their
And they're like, do not abandon him in his hour of need as he has abandoned us when he knows not what he does. So funny. All musical movies should end with a helicopter chase. I'm realizing that this is a through line for me, that I want helicopters in all my movie musicals. Does not apply to Miss Saigon. I'm not endorsing Miss Saigon, but in other instances, amazing.
I threw around the idea with Adam about like doing like year-end awards, and I think best performance by helicopter may be one of the categories.
I think we need one more to make it a competitive,
Yeah.
competitive category.
Unless it's like, and then
There's 3 so far, Molly. There's 2. Annie, the second or the 2014 Annie had a helicopter.
Annie 3 doesn't count. Annie 3 has been
that was not a
disqualified from
performance by
awards.
a helicopter. That was a
To be clear, the sister acts are of a piece. The Annies are not of a piece. To be
Oh.
very clear.
absolutely.
It's not a sequel though. It's a different version
Right.
of it, and it's not allowed in the canon. Yeah, I think if we're just saying favorite one-liners, my favorite is when she goes to her cell. Well, it's kind of a cell. She goes to her room for her first time, and she's like, "Where's the phone?" And Maggie Smith goes, "Who would you call?" And she goes, "I don't know, Satan."
That's a Carrie Fisher line. 100%
for
for
sure.
sure.
There was also the one where she's talking to the cops and she's saying like, "I've never seen a dead body before." It could be, I don't know. Sometimes you're driving down the highway and you see it on the side of the road.
Also, like that now knowing it, and like I want to go back and rewatch this movie, like knowing that like her lines have been like
Carrie
bumped
Fisher
by Carrie
Yeah.
Fisher.
Yeah,
I
believe
so
it's
good.
Carrie Fisher, but it was also so natural that I would
Yes.
also believe it was just Whoopi improvising.
Yes.
Yeah. My favorite is when she hits the roulette table and she's like, bet 23, bet all on 23, and then it's not 23, and she's like, this was a lesson for everyone. Let this be a lesson for everyone, and then runs.
There are so many little jokes like that. That's one of the best parts about this movie. It's just those like little dumb, like, what if she gets like dumb things that are almost like feel very sitcom-y, in just like it's just an idea to like do for like a moment in a scene, and then it has nothing to do with anything else. Like you don't need to like linger on it. It stays its welcome perfectly. It's so funny. This movie is like littered with these. This movie is also littered with montage sequences because there are 2. Anytime there's more than one, I'm like, well, but I think they're both great.
It's such a marker of a 90s movie
It
that
is
there
very,
has to be a
very
montage.
90s, very 90s thing.
Just a touch of love, just a touch of love.
Shall we transition into talking about some of the Catholicism in a bigger way? I've got
Yes.
some research to drop on everyone. Molly's academic corner.
Come on, JSTOR. Come on, bringing out the JSTOR.
Absolutely. Project Muse. Okay. So Adam, RJ and I are not going to talk about Catholicism. You can just turn off your mic. You're not invited to the conversation.
Bye.
Adam can relate, with the maroon robes.
Oh, you literally turned off his mic.
I did literally turn off my mic. I mean, I can like relate.
It's
in
close
that
enough to Catholicism.
We're like the sister from another mister. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Because you grew up Anglican. What's it called?
Episcopalian.
Episcopalian. Yeah.
And it's still
Close
very
enough.
much like their service is still very much like sit stand.
I mean, yeah, because
responsorial
it's literally
songs.
the Anglican Church is just Henry couldn't divorce his wife, so he just made the same church but for England.
Right. Same vibe of Simon Says, but nobody wins.
Yeah.
As they say in The Simpsons, my other favorite piece of Catholic media, The Simpsons Catholic episode. So I want to talk about an article called "Guitar-Toting Nuns and Hand-Clapping Love Songs: How the Implementation of the Vernacular Transformed American Catholic Church Music" by Catherine E. Harmon. So what I thought was
Mary Catherine?
Sister Mary Catherine. Thank you, Sister Mary Catherine. What I thought was interesting was there were two things that I wanted to research for this because I unfortunately could not find any academic articles written directly about the movie Sister Act, which I find frankly offensive. I may need to write one of my own one day to,
Please do.
to solve this. But I was like, okay, two things that could be interesting to look at. One would be like Catholic music, because like what is the like what does this reflect of like the actual experience of the Catholic Church and how it relates to music? And then I also wanted to look into race and the Catholic Church, which we're going to talk about later. But what was interesting is that both articles I found were about the 60s, but written in the last couple of years. And so it feels like there's like this, I don't know, re-examination that's happening around the 60s and how it changed things for the church. So 1964 to 1969 is the like kind of era she's looking at, which is post-Vatican II, which for our non-initiated
Shout out to Vatican II.
Shout out to Vatican II. We love it.
So,
absolutely.
To get Vatican II, should I have seen Vatican I? Because I missed that one.
She squashed Vatican I, honey. Vatican I, who is she? Honestly, I don't know. I don't even know what happened in Vatican I at all. I have no idea.
I just know Vatican I was Latin. That was the only thing I know.
No, Vatican II is Latin.
Oh, I thought we're currently in Vatican II.
Yeah, Vatican II is no more Latin. Are you saying Vatican I is?
Yeah, Vatican Latin was Latin. We're giving Latin. She's giving Latin.
She's giving Latin. Vatican II, please welcome to the stage, vernacular. I'm sure I don't need to explain it any clearer.
I think that's
right
clear for our audience. Yeah, absolutely.
Vatican II was a council of the Catholic Church where they made a lot of pretty radical changes for the church in response to many things, the biggest one being the Holocaust. And one thing that I cannot stress to you enough if you're not aware of this is how deeply anti-Semitic the Catholic Church was pre-Vatican II and how much this was a response to, whoops, Hitler was a Catholic. Maybe we went a little wrong on that one.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah, not one that we talk about a lot. Not a guy that you really want to claim as your own. So
I just assume
too.
anyone from like Austria or Germany is Lutheran. That's just what I go for.
It's actually like a pretty equal split there of like Protestants and Catholics.
That makes sense. Because Benedict was German, right?
Are you talking about popes?
Yeah, the last one. Not
was he
this
German
current
or
one.
Austria. I think you're right. He was from
it's the same.
Oh, I'm sure that won't offend anyone.
Not everyone listens to this podcast.
Just my mother.
Yeah.
If she ever did.
I don't know. I know very little about Benedict because he was a very boring place filler. I assume. I mean, probably did something bad because the whole retiring thing, but we don't
should
know
watch
yet
The
what
Two
that
Popes.
was.
It's very good.
We recommend The Two Popes.
I watched some of The Young Pope, and
This is a different piece of media.
It's entirely unrelated. I thought it was like an anthology American Horror Story situation.
No, it's its own movie about that switch from.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Okay, I will put that on the list.
And they meet in a garden.
I will finally actually define Vatican II. And vernacular, meaning church doesn't have to be in Latin anymore. And a big part of this was also aggiornamento, I guess is what it's called, which is like an Italian word for updating and modernizing. So there was a lot of talk about like, how do we get people excited to go to church again? So there was this Bob's.
Twiggy. Twiggy's Bob. It's the 60s.
Oh my God.
So there was this debate between professional church musicians who preferred old school Catholic music, meaning like Gregorian chants, and Renaissance polyphony, which I don't know what that means, but I would like to ask Adam to please put a clip of whatever you find in response to that term being put into Google.
Can you put how to spell it in the notes so I can
in the notes?
Can you highlight it in the notes? Oh, There it is.
Yeah, polyphony. Polyphony.
Polyphony.
Yeah, I don't know which. It could be any of those, honestly. Versus liturgists who preferred music that allowed people to actually participate in the music and to keep up with modern times. So liturgists are people who can like read the announcements, they can do readings, and they can do like calls to worship, but they can't do a sermon or prayers or sacraments. That's only priests. But a liturgist could be like ordained or not ordained. And there was this whole liturgical movement, which was all about worship reform, and they wanted to like go back to ancient practice and like revitalize and make things more like expressive. So as part of that, they really wanted to like get people involved in mass, essentially. They also apparently really influenced ecumenicalism, which is the concept of Christian unity, and like we should all be Christians together instead of fighting about small differences in doctrine. But a lot of professional church musicians were worried that this was going to like dumb down mass, essentially. And she has a quote from a musicologist who said that he was worried that congregational participation and democratization threatened to be interpreted as a mandate for lower standards.
Wow.
Yes. And so there was this definite sense of like pushing back on the hippie youths and like we're not interested in this like liberalism that we're seeing from the young people, so we're not going to be singing their music. And the greatest example of this, February 9th, 1969, right-wing activist Donald Lobsinger wore a clown costume to picket St. John Birchman's Catholic Church in Detroit, and his companions had signs singing guitar-taughtin' hippie nuns and stand-up communion hand-clapping love songs to illustrate the fact that they felt like they were sort of like making a mockery of the church with this modern music. So Maggie Smith is Lobsinger, and Dolores Van Cartier is in fact a liturgist. And this movie is like tapping into this real thing that happened, but was written by a Jewish person. So I love it.
I also feel like from a Protestant perspective, I also
You finally have a voice to speak out.
let the Protestant talk. We never
Excuse
get a
me,
chance
I am a
to talk.
wasp.
We've never heard your
We
point
are
of view before.
subjugated in this country. From a Protestant perspective, especially like a division of Protestant department of
Department,
Protestant
yeah.
Yeah.
that is more traditional in like we do readings and we do communion and blah 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 blah. We have like mass basically.
Yeah.
It was, I feel like we kind of went through this, at least the churches that I was more familiar with, like around my area that I grew up, which was like Northern Indiana. We went through this kind of thing with like in the late 90s, early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, where it was like, well, hymns are boring. No one likes hymns anymore. And
She's
praise
out.
music,
Go to bed, hymns.
go to bed hymns. And you know what? Hers are in. And then it was like
Drag has to come up with a way to work hymns into a challenge just so they can make that pun.
And then it was like, praise music, guitars. Do you guys know about guitars? Have you heard of guitars? So I think that's kind of interesting that it almost like it's cyclical in that way.
Well, and it's interesting in that I can think of some Catholic songs that I know that have that kind of folk infusion, which is what they were talking about
Very
in this article.
lute-like, yeah.
But like not past that. It's not, I can't think of any pop genres past the 60s. So it feels like that kind of got like that debate got lost over time, and like we didn't keep up with the current music in any way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear some Catholic K-pop. I would be down if there's a Catholic K-pop group.
Yeah, let's see some choreo.
There's a big contingent of Catholics in Korea. I would love to see if they have somehow different music. Yeah.
Choreography, do a little show for us. I will say my parish in Phoenix, like literally after I graduated, they got rid of the music director had left. So they only do like the organ music in like certain holy days, but for the most part, it's like this like band. So I mean, it's still the same, like they still use the same music, but obviously like played with like guitars and a drum set, and it's just like
it's
in church. So it's such a weird like situation. But I also know that like it's also like since we have a big Spanish speaking population also in Phoenix, like that they also play it for the Spanish mass. So I also wonder if it's like also a cultural thing, because they're
I also wonder if there's just like less organ people who can play the
That's true.
organ.
Yeah.
Like
being trained to play an organ. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that organ is necessarily synonymous with traditional Catholic music. I mean,
That's true.
It is iconic, but it is not like the hymns that they were singing at the beginning of Sister Act are not
right.
That don't necessarily have an organ.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, RJ. I want to know your thoughts on this. Of as Adam was talking about with like praise music, that I feel like music now is like one of the biggest distinctions between Catholics and Protestants in the U.S. That like Protestants have this like poppy sounding is music that would like get you up and feeling things, and Catholics are like, we have decided that our music is boring. That is our deal.
Well, it's that, but then there's also the Black church that like is just owns gospel and has decided, and like everyone agrees that it's the greatest like version of worship music ever, and we're all just like, well, good for them, because we can't even attempt.
It's like we won't be doing it anytime soon here. Yeah, I guess I didn't. I mean, I guess I didn't realize that like the call and response didn't come until like this movement. I always assumed that like what we think about mass now of the like and with your spirit, like that kind of like call and response like came in this like movement, or this like liturgist movement. Well, that's
Did I write that down, or is that what you decided is true?
Well, you said announcements, readings, call to worship, but not sermon prayer. Like they had more people involved. I just mean
that's what a liturgist does in church. Not that they necessarily introduced that. But I mean, I think the spirit of what you're talking about seems like it's true, because it was like this idea of like get people participating in mass. I just don't want to say for sure that stuff came in. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense, I think. I definitely in college when we took like that sociology of religion class, and we had to like go to different religious services, and that was like the first time I had ever gone to like a Methodist church, and it was like, where's the format? Where do I sit? There's not even a place to kneel.
Loosey-goosey,
because you don't kneel, you just sit and stand and vibe. It's like a jam. Like as a Catholic, I don't like the word like jam. I don't jam when I'm in church. I shouldn't be jamming at church. I can't, like, it's something about it. It's just like,
I shouldn't be feeling things in church. I feel like
because it feels just like, I'm like, it's almost like class. Like I'm listening to like doctrine or like to scripture, and then like an analysis of what it is. And I think like when it gets blurred about like, how does this apply to my daily life of like, and that kind of for me gets a little like, ooh, no. And that's kind of that's why I like the Catholicness of like, this is the information we're giving to you. Like it is a study.
But this is the fascinating part about like church as institution, or just like most religious organizational anything across the entire globe, is like the theatricality of it, and that's what makes it so much fun to like kind of poke fun at, to some degree. And like, because we were just home for Easter, and because we went to the Easter Vigil service, which was the night before Easter.
You want to talk drag, honey? You want to talk pageant?
You want to talk about liturgy? And they had like the incense, and we don't do it like for every weekend or every week at church, but like the high holy days, obviously we do. And
I was an incense altar boy, so I was doing this.
She was voguing.
I was voguing the house down incense.
Absolutely. She was an incense girl.
I was an incense girl.
Material girl. Stupid. But I asked my mom, because I was like, it was the first time I had ever been in church and like the incense had happened, and I was like, what is this? What is the meaning of the incense? Like, what is, everything is supposed to have like a purpose, basically, in like church. There's always like a metaphor for it. So I was like, I wonder what the metaphor is. So I was like, my mom is becoming a deacon in the church, blah, blah, blah. So on her way. And I was
shout out to Nan and her journey.
Shout out to Nan and your journey, Mom. And I was like, what's the purpose of the incense? And she was like, oh, it's, you know, it's supposed to be like prayers. And I was like, oh. But then it made me think of, I think the reason church resonates so well, or just like religious stuff in general, and a lot of them have similar concepts even in differing religions, is that like they employ all the senses. So like the ornate spectacle of like a Catholic church, or like the beautiful like geometrical shapes and like a Muslim mosque, to like the scent that you can get from incense, or like even just the music. So it's like all these things like combined to make this like a specific experience that like, especially over like millennia of like people living in like huts and like not having anything to look at in their own house, that when you go to a church and you're like, wow, it would feel really crazy to like go from like a house where you literally have like a wood floor and like clay walls, and then you go into a church and you're like, there's literal goals. There's actual that's the goal that they are talking about.
Well, it's interesting
on the tablets, on the stone fucking tablets. That's the goddamn goal.
It's interesting, Adam, that you point out the like over millennia thing, because that's actually kind of what the like traditionalists are trying to argue about when they say like we shouldn't modernize the music and stuff, is this idea of like, well, this has existed for all these millennia. And there's like definitely like a branch of like traditional Catholics. Although there's a thing called like trad cath, which is like really intense, like anti-Vatican II, to the extent of the anti-Semitism stuff is not even, we're not even sure about that.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
No, he was just telling me who we know is
we know adjacent someone.
Adjacent,
okay.
yeah, adjacently.
So I'm not necessarily calling these people that, but like this sort of a traditionalist arm that's like very right-wing in the Catholic Church, that's like about like it should be mysterious, it should be pomp and circumstance, like we're doing the robes, we're doing the thing, we want it to be like you can't understand the prayer because you're just like, what is God? I don't know, and that's what's cool about it. And while I don't like a lot of that, I can understand that viewpoint and that like thing. And I remember when I was a kid that my dad, like my parents were very into, like our family's Catholic, but in like a very casual way. And like you can go and like find your own religious path. And if you want to do something else, that's like totally cool with us. But my dad always said like, but I would pick like one of the old ones. Like he was always on board of like, you know, like Catholics, Jews, Muslims, like they're kind of like, they've really like figured it out over time, and like go with one of the old school religions, not one of these new hippy dippy Protestant branches.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? I also think it's like the thing of like, which calls back to like Fiddler. I don't know how we got from Sister Act to Fiddler on the Roof, but
natural.
The thing of like tradition, feeling a connection to like just like a lineage of mankind through doing something. Like even when we got married, for our, like we had my priest, he did our wedding, and we had said like, oh, are we allowed to say anything? And he was like, yes, you can say things to each other, but your vows will be the vows that have been the vows forever, because that is the thing that like every person has done since we created these vows. Like that's what's so important about it. And I was like, that idea, I understand, because even in the moment I was like, wow, that is such a cool thing to think about, that like for hundreds of years like people have said the same things to each other. So like that, it is like interesting to like, I don't know if I wouldn't say I like am a traditionalist, but I do understand like looking at things like that and being like, well, it is nice to have them. It is nice to have at least like the base of the tradition to start with.
Yeah, but I think that's always like whenever we want to do something to modernize like a tradition that's been there. It's not like the people that are doing it, or you wouldn't think that like they're not just like throwing away all the bad. Like obviously the liturgical movement is like they're doing it to still, because they want people to like share the experience, still listen to like these tenets in the scripture. Like they're just like modernizing the things that need to adapt so that it works with people today. Because also like our time in the world right now is the fastest that the world has developed like in time. So it's frustrating when you hear like the argument of like, well, we haven't changed this for millennia, but it's like, yeah, because this is the millennium that we're moving at like 4 times speed.
I don't know, that one day that the first caveman made fire, I don't know, that was a pretty huge jump in one day.
But also, like, the idea that we haven't changed things is, like, not true either.
Yeah.
Like, Gregorian chants are from a century. I don't know which one, but, like, from a century.
From
and
Gregory's
we didn't have them before
century,
that.
honey.
From Gregory's time, man. And so, like, I just feel like the notion that we don't change is also false. But,
Yeah.
like, I understand the appeal of trying to get back to something and to, reach across millennia and like have an experience and like be aware. I mean, like I've gone to like really old churches in Europe and had that thought of like, oh my, like people like came in these doors in 1100 and saw essentially the same thing that I'm seeing right now. And like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
but
sure.
it is also funny that like we're at a point in like media, because there's so much media now, and this is just going to like general topics, that like I think really what tradition is almost rooted in is less like the tradition itself and more the like nostalgia of having done it as like when you were developing, like your brain was developing, and like being able to pass that exact thing that you had in your development down to the next generation. And like obviously now in media, like everybody's trying to go back to their childhood, so we're just making everything, we're either remaking things or we're just like making things that were popular for a specific time period. And I wonder if there's like any kind of like corollary there where it's like just like maybe we've all fooled ourselves into believing that like people actually care about tradition and the deep heart and soul of like what they actually care about is just being able to like pass down, like Disney people being able to be like, well, I wrote Pirates of the Caribbean this way when I was 5 years old, so it can't change in any way so that my grandkid can write it when I'm 85 years old.
This is a really interesting thesis that like the lack of institutions and traditions is causing the nostalgia like craze that like we don't have things like Catholicism to, I mean, of course it still exists, but like a lot of millennials are not going to like raise their children Catholic as an example. And so they like need something of an equivalent to like feel that they are passing down. And so like that, the lack of religion is causing people to be nostalgic about 80s movies is like a really interesting concept.
There's
I think we found, and we think we found your
I'll throw out the draft I have to start over.
I've been writing furiously for 2 days. This is a brand new.
I think this one's better than the first. Yeah. No, I think there's something there. I want to, before we wrap on this article, just say that she ends in her list of 60s songs that have influenced things she ends it by talking about Biden's reference to On Eagle's Wings in his, I don't remember if it was his like inauguration or his like,
I
whatever the opposite of a concession
Yeah.
speech is, right, when he was elected.
Yeah.
But truly the most Catholic thing I've ever seen on a political stage in my lifetime. And I don't know, RJ, if you had the same
I remember
visceral reaction.
I think it was the election night speech. I don't think it was the. But yeah, I do remember the quote. And he will
Raise you up on
on
eagle's wings, bang on the breath of dawn. It is our favorite song because it is the most musical song that Catholics have. This is our knee slapper.
This is our 11 o'clock. Yeah,
this is our
absolutely.
11 o'clock number for all Catholics is Eagle's Wings. That is the
And hold you in the palm of his hand.
I'm getting into Sweeney Todd categories with that bass that I'm trying to hit there. Great. Should we talk about the Catholic Church and race?
Yeah, because I think that is like a huge part of this movie that is. This part of the movie feels very like 90s in that this was the moment where everyone was like, race isn't real, like color doesn't exist.
Yeah, so they address it
almost like
in sideways ways. Like it's like her demeanor, you know what I mean? Like they're addressing it in different ways.
Yeah, but it's also never addressed.
Yeah.
Like she's never like when they are looking for the nun, like it's a great line when they're running around the casino trying to find her, and she goes, have you seen a nun? She's got a Carmelite habit. And you're like, why don't you just say, have you seen a black nun? Because she's the only black nun. It would be a little easier than trying to explain the differences between a Franciscan habit and a Carmelite habit. Might be.
I mean, the joke is so funny. The idea that nun thinks that that's like an accessible
giveaway.
so that's the way to do it. So it like is very, very funny.
It is funny. Yes.
I think so. As we've referenced before, Bette Midler was originally, like when it was first pitched and designed, it was for Bette Midler. So somewhere in the process, Whoopi Goldberg gets cast, and I don't know like how much script changing happened after she was cast to like acknowledge the fact that she's a nun. But what's interesting is that the Catholic Church does not have very many African Americans in it at all. Like it's in my mind famous for that. I don't know if that's like if it's famous, but like it would be really unusual to see, like especially particularly like Black American nun. There are definitely African people and like Caribbean people who are Catholic, but like the Black community in the US, not very Catholic. So it's unusual. And I found an article from 2014 who at that time, and I'm guessing that this is hopefully not true anymore, but they were pointing out that in 2014, Whoopi Goldberg was still the only woman of color to have anchored a major worldwide hit movie, meaning it was in the top 500 highest grossing movies of all time at that time, which I hope has changed because they also were pointing out that it was like about to fall off the top 500. So they were like, when that happens, then we would have none. So hopefully something else replaced it. None. But I feel like, they really kind of like bounce around it, except to me, the line that like really stands out is when she opens the door the first time to see Whoopi Goldberg, and she sees her there, and then she closes the door and she says like, that's a conspicuous person. That feels like a really weird moment of like, aren't any Black people here? And especially because she has this like, it's not an afro, but she's got like really big hair.
Teased out.
And this like difference between the habits versus the afro feels like very specific, right?
Yeah. I do like that. I mean, this is just going off the hair moment, that at the end she has like the habit on from the neck down,
but has her hair
she
out,
has her hair out, which I really like and appreciate. I also think, I mean, the generous reading that I always gave it as like a kid whenever I remember that line was just that she is wearing like, it's the line in the Golden Girls where she goes on a date with a priest and doesn't realize that he's a priest, and she had like Dorothy had gotten dressed up for it. And he goes, oh, you look really nice. Tonight, and she's very embarrassed. And she goes, I look like the mother of a solid gold dancer.
Because Whoopi here has like that like lame like jacket thing.
I'm not saying that it's not like it makes sense outside of her race as well, but it's weird. It's like this moment where you're like, someone has to mention that. Like it's you feel the like stiflingness of 90s colorblindism that they like couldn't say. They couldn't have a line addressing like she might also stand out because she's the only Black woman in this convent, you know? Like there's this, it's like very odd. So I was then curious, why are there so few Black people in the Catholic Church? So I read my other article about the 60s, which was by Matthew Kressler, called Real Good and Sincere Catholics. And what Kressler did was he went to the Chicago Archdiocese and he found letters that were sent to the Archdiocese between 1965 and 1968, which were Catholics writing into the diocese to say how upset they were about the recent publicity of a few nuns and priests who had been arrested in civil rights protests. And he's basically trying to, he's trying to make a case for Catholics now, like to really highlight the ordained people who did protest for civil rights and everything. But like probably the majority of Catholics really weren't of that opinion. And so he kind of like uses these letters to identify 3 different like major pieces of rhetoric that Catholics used in order to kind of justify their position. Because they would never just like call themselves segregationists and like say that exactly. It was always this sort of like, it's not about that, but like, here's my issue with it, which let me tell you, as I read these as a Northern ethnic white Catholic in 2020 who has gone through Black Lives Matter, several movements of Black Lives Matter, and interacted with Catholics around it. Yeah. I will say I feel these rhetorics are alive today. So the first one was Catholicism is grounded in law and order. And it's this idea of like, well, the church is about like you follow, you're obedient, you like listen to the law, you're respectful. And so like these people are being disobedient. And a lot of like, I send my child to a Catholic school, and is this the kind of thing you're teaching them? Like I sent them there so they would like get disciplined, and this is not what you're teaching them. The second was the idea of like the church is going outside of its role in spiritual matters. It's getting into politics, and like that's not what the church is supposed to be
which
about.
Which is insane. Truly bonkers. It's like when Disney in Florida was like, well, we just think the best way that we can enact change is by presenting people in movies. And I was like, girl, you have 800 lobbyists in Tallahassee right now. Get the fuck out of town. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So I would disagree that the church has never interfered in any political matters before.
Girl, you eat fish on Fridays for a fucking reason, and it's so that fishermen could make money in Italy, girl. Oh.
Yeah, and then the last one was positioning white people as like real Catholics, and specifically this related a lot to busing movements to like desegregate schools. And there was a sense of like, well, we've invested in our community and we like pay so that we like the real Catholics can go to this school, and then you're going to bring in these like non-Catholics, but the non-Catholics were like very coded as Black, but it was like this refusal to acknowledge that aspect of it. It was like, no, it's about like Catholics and non-Catholics. It's like not about race. It's like about Catholics and non-Catholics. But Kressler does a really good job of like analyzing how the word Catholic has been employed for a long time to designate this like ethnic white identity, and that, well, there's like truth to that. There's also this really problematic sense of like Catholic is not synonymous with white. In fact, if you look worldwide, it's very much not the majority of Catholics in any way. But like in the US, and like specifically like the northern US, there's like this really specific identity to being Catholic that like designates you as like white with an asterisk. And I feel really complicatedly about this because I always felt like growing up, because I like went to a Catholic school, like I grew up in this kind of like Irish Catholic enclave, but also like my family's like Irish and Italian and stuff. So Catholic has always felt to me like my most like solid identity, right? That it like brings together my other ethnic roots and like expresses my identity in like a really clear way. And I can like point to like, oh, this is the way that like my life was different because I grew up Catholic versus something else. And so I feel like this article made me like question, like, is that an ethical employment of that word though? If I'm using it in relationship to race in any way, like, should I be like a little uncomfortable with that? So I thought that was really interesting, and I hope that our other ethnic whites listening to this are thinking about things critically as you're hearing this. But my favorite part was in the like disobedience section. He quoted a letter where somebody said something about these smirking women in reference to the nuns who were being arrested for civil rights. And I think smirking nuns should be the new nasty women. I'm all about. I want merch that says "smirking nun." I love it.
Nevertheless, she smirked.
Nevertheless, she smirked.
Mr. Vice President, I'm smirking.
Reclaiming my smirk. Reclaiming my smirk. Reclaiming my smirk. Dumb.
Oh my God. I think it's just, I honestly like moving to America and like realizing
The
that
movie?
like, yeah, that's coming to
Oh, that's
America.
coming to
Yeah, I had the same thought and then had to correct it in my brain.
Moving to America, one of the big things that I had to like culturally adjust was the fact that like being Catholic was not the dominant like culture, because the Philippines famously, outside of the Vatican City, is the like second like almost everyone in the country is like Catholic.
You outranked Poland? I always thought Poland was like
we're like up there.
No, it's the
Amazing.
Philippines.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you looked it up
Amazing.
before.
I looked it up. Yeah.
Congratulations. I'm really proud of you.
It's because I think there are more Polish people who are now just like atheists, whereas
okay.
like there are less Filipinos who are atheist.
Yeah, that
it's
tracks
like,
with Europe overall, I guess, too. Yeah.
it's like 98% of Filipinos identify as Catholic, which is
So like
wild.
learning all of the like different kind of not like social and cultural politics about what it means to be Catholic in America definitely does feel like it's more of like from a state of privilege, whiteness, because like I feel like most of like what we think of Catholic is like, yeah, like Catholic private schools and like the neighborhoods that surround it, the people that can afford to do that. Like even in
That's so interesting that you say that, because you lived in your first experience with living in America was living in Phoenix, where I feel like your Catholic churches would probably be a lot of like Mexican people.
Yes, but because our parish was very close to my like private Catholic school, the school was very white, even though the parish was very mixed.
Interesting.
And like also like the politics of the like
Your school's also very expensive.
yes, the school is very expensive, but we have like financial aid, and it's all the like majority of the financial aid recipients are like the Mexican population in Phoenix,
Black and brown communities.
and also the like the idea of like Catholic school has like work study, which we had, and like the idea of like in high school, why do like Black and brown students have to work to afford their education, you know, like that. Like there was just so many things in place that I felt like me adjusting to the idea of like, oh, being Catholic in America has more to do with really like class and like privilege rather than just like we are all Catholic.
Well, weirdly, like I had a very similar experience being born in the Philippines. But no, I had a very similar experience growing up in South Bend, which is like dominated by Notre Dame and Notre Dame culture, and just like we have a huge Polish community and we have a huge Irish community in South Bend. So like I didn't realize for a long time growing up that like Catholics in America, I really don't want to use the term persecuted, because truly what does that mean? But like we're a minority group in America for a very large history of this country, and I think still today technically, because I think just if you go on
minority
Catholic
by
versus
numbers,
Protestant, and I just didn't realize that, because it was so like I knew I wasn't Catholic, but like I knew so many people that were, and there are so many Catholic churches in South Bend that I didn't realize that. So like I think it was like the first time we talked about like the Ku Klux Klan and like whatever grade that was, and like talked about how like they also did it in addition to terrorizing Black people, they also like hated Catholics because they thought they were like, I don't even know what the belief is. They're in cahoots with Italy. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But famously the Ku Klux Klan
I don't think Italy, I think the Vatican, but yeah.
But that was like the moment where I was like, oh, that's so weird. I just always assumed that like the whole
Catholics were
country-
in.
Yeah. And like then like JFK was the first Catholic president, and it was like a
Yeah.
big deal. I was like,
Yeah.
oh.
I just love that we are
Interesting.
slowly revealing the formula to get a little theater queer, which is majority Catholic environment,
Yeah.
significantly younger than your older siblings, and have a complicated relationship with your father. Those are the three things that you need.
That's it. That's the formula.
It's the year end awards are gonna be like what are the like best ways to become like a shitty theater person with awful takes. Come on,
But at
Please
least
write in, Showgaze listeners, how many of you fit into those three categories?
Yeah.
uh,
Well, that's really interesting. I love
yeah.
that.
I want to say quickly that I think all of what you say really resonates, and that I grew up in like the really privileged part of Catholicism. I literally went to a high school where there were peacocks on the ground. So it was a really specific version of Catholicism. But RJ, I wanted to ask, and feel free to just be like, I don't want to answer this question and we don't have to talk about it. But I'm really curious.
Are you gay?
Can you tell me about your first sexual experience with a man? I want to know, coming in to America as a Filipino kid with this like white and Hispanic like mixed
demographic
Catholic environment.
Mhm.
What do you feel like? How do you relate to the Hispanic community, especially considering that like Spain also colonized the Philippines? So like, I don't know if you consider yourself in any way Hispanic. This is a whole topic, I'm sure. But like, I would just be curious to know like how, like, did you see yourself as kind of basically fitting in with Hispanic kids, or like you didn't fit into either at all, or like how was that relationship for you?
Before you start, can I say something?
Yeah.
So I am on
I'm a
Filipino-
white person, so I'd like to fit
I'm a
right
white person, and I'd
Before
like
you
to speak.
Before you speak about your
I'd like to
experience.
speak about your experience for you as a white person. I am currently on Filipino TikTok, meaning I'm
The
getting
algorithm
the algorithm has decided I'm Filipino, or at least knows that I'm married to a Filipino. But we were watching. It wasn't actually TikTok. We were watching a video about like RJ was watching a video trying to figure out what current slang is going on in the Philippines. And the person who was like doing the video broke it up into different like roots, basically like root words, like where the words are coming from. And the Philippines, just for anybody that doesn't know, is very interesting because I find this very interesting. I'm very genuine in this
white
moment.
explaining a word. It's, okay, yeah.
Right
Continue.
now, it's happening.
Yeah. No, I would much rather have Adam explain it. Like,
Okay.
Because I think the most interesting part about the Philippines is that why it's so
It's just funny hearing him say it to me.
listeners who are white and have never gone to the Philippines, so myself included. The Philippines was colonized by Spain, as you said, and then it was also taken over by the Japanese, and then also like basically America colonized it as well. So it is a very unique country, which is a series of islands. So it's already unique in that way. It's an archipelago. Come on, geography.
Yeah, it's like interesting because it's almost like our path really kind of is almost similar to those like colonized countries in South America and Africa, but because we're like in Southeast Asia, like there's already such a big like more like Buddhist like you know like culture of like all those other Southeast Asia countries, because like you know like more of like the Chinese and Japanese like got there like earlier, but because Columbus literally hit us like not Columbus, Magellan literally like crashed into us and was like, oh, what's this place? That we were colonized by Spain so early that like that kind of like defined us. And when moving to Phoenix, there was so much similarity between like Mexican American and like Filipino American culture. Like even with like our language, there are a lot of like Spanish words our names are Spanish. So like my dad will get like Spanish phone calls sometimes because they just assume his name Rodolfo is Spanish. And so I did like relate a lot, you know, like my best friends from high school are Mexican, and I think I did relate to them a lot more because of we had like shared same cultural kind of like touchstones, like very family centric, you know, like church going, you know, that kind of same vibes. But I think like it was interesting, like adding.
So you got Encanto, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's like a running bit on TikTok that like Filipinos will take Encanto and Moana and be like, this is a Filipino story when it has nothing to do with the Philippines, just because it's like, yeah, like Encanto and Coco are like, yeah, this is Filipino. Yeah,
Cool.
I think that the interesting part about like adding on top of that is also like the queer experience going to an all boys Catholic school. Also with the fact that like I was a brown immigrant in
You
that
should write a play
environment.
about it.
I should write a play about it, Adam. Thank you so much.
Did you write a play about it?
I'm currently working on one, and hopefully I'm putting it out in the ether that, you know, it'll be on a Chicago stage someday soon. We'll see.
Amazing.
But yeah.
Cool. Well, very interesting. So yeah, do you consider yourself Hispanic? Like, does
I
that
think,
label feel like it fits you?
I think technically it does fit like the Philippines specifically, but because like it's just easier to just say Asian or Pacific Islander for the Philippines, because I think that also is correct. I think like there needs to be like some anthropological or someone that just like does the math, do the numbers, if like can Filipinos actually say they're also Hispanic? Because like even now, like in census type questions, that's always a separate question. So it's like it's more about like ethnicity than race, right? Like, yeah. So
And the Philippines culturally, because it is so Catholic, because it is so Catholic, feels so different from all the neighboring countries in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Even Malaysia, which is like a hop, skip, and a jump away, feels like a foreign land, basically. Yeah. I said, me, never
Listeners,
having been there.
Filipino historian, me from
I
TikTok.
feel like
Do you want me to talk about South Korea?
listeners
Because I
did
learned a
not
lot about that one too.
listeners did not expect this level of conversation when they clicked on the Sister Act episode, and I hope that they're satisfied with today's narratives.
I really hope so too. I think like truly because of how Catholic it is, like it just opened up a lot of the Catholic baggage that all of us collectively have. Especially since, I mean, like all of us had a shared, you know, like Catholic college experience together.
Right. I mean, I should say it's not like a coincidence that all three of us had a deep Catholic experience. We met at a Catholic college. It's not that crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jesuit.
Just because we're the cool priests.
I just thought that was a really good. I thought that was a good joke to end on, so I was pausing for the transition there.
Yeah. Adam, make sure you cut it.
I thought you were like,
Adam, go back and cut.
Because it is very different from Notre Dame.
Jesuits are cool Catholics. We love them.
Yeah.
Yes.
End it there. End it now. End it now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, I love him. I'm gonna follow. He'll always be my true love. From now until forever. Yes, I love him. I follow,
Well, what did critics say about this movie? Let's talk about it. So it has 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, very good. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times at the time, he said, "The first time I saw the coming attractions trailer for Sister Act, I roared with laughter and delight. The second time I laughed again. Even the third time I smiled. It's one of the great trailers. Unfortunately, it's better directed than the movie. The trailer has high energy and whammo punchlines. The movie is sort of low-key and contemplative and a little too thoughtful. I don't agree." That's the end of the quote. I don't agree. I read his whole review and he's pretty mixed about the movie. I think this is like the time where we start heading into Roger Ebert hates fun territory, because there was a period of time where like anything that like was a good
fluffy,
time, he was like, it's not for me. And that's fine if that's your taste, whatever. It's just like crazy.
Don't mark it as a negative of a movie.
When you go to Rotten Tomatoes and you click on reviews, you can filter to top critics. So basically like big publication critics, whatever. And on Rotten Tomatoes, they only have like 6 or 7 for this movie for this time. And he is the only considered negative review of this film, which is like crazy because it's such a good movie.
Yeah, and I also feel like,
as we've said,
we've generally agreed when you've had Ebert like reviews in other shows, I feel like we've usually
generally
agreed with
agreed
him.
with him. Yeah.
So yeah, what a weird phase that he just like doesn't like one of the best 3 movies ever made, according to my estimation, which is obviously
I
correct.
think this was just like his 90s moment. He just really didn't, I don't know, because he also did this later with like The Mummy, which is like another great fun romp of a film. And he was like, it's just like it's not really intelligent. It's not really doing anything new. And it was like, girl, I'm not here at the Mummy for something new, girl. I'm at the Mummy
To see the mummy.
I'm seeing mummies, honey. So David Anson of Newsweek said, as a roly-poly nun given to giddy fits of girlish enthusiasm, Kathy Najimy is a comic miracle worker, while the hatchet-faced Mary Wicks milks the crabby Sister Mary Lazarus to the last sweet and sour drop. Maggie Smith could play the imperious Mother Superior in her sleep and get chuckles, and she does. Emile Ardolino directs with neither grace nor subtlety, but with a sure nose for the crowd-pleasing gag. What can you say about a movie in 1982 that shows a gaggle of singing nuns solving the problems of the inner city with a smile, a paintbrush, and a song? This is one Hollywood product even Dan Quayle must love. That's a recommendation, sort of. My God, is there anything more 1992 than having a Dan Quayle reference?
I have literally nothing. I have no idea what he was trying to get at with that.
Potato. That's all I know. And Jeff Manel of the Hollywood Reporter says, it's all pretty predictable. And if there was time, you might get pissed off at the ridiculousness of it all. But things move at such a quickened pace, and the comedic timing of all involved is impressive enough to override the structural flaws.
What structural flaws?
What structural
Truly.
flaws? The structure is simple.
Yeah, I mean, it might be like the plot might be flimsy, but it's not structurally unsound. It's pretty clear
it's
what
standing.
the like stakes and climax are here.
God,
just men writing.
I now
want words.
I want to teach an intro to theater class where I teach the Aristotelian arc using Sister Act.
Perfect. But what do the people say? So on Letterboxd, George Severus gives it 5 stars and says, I cannot believe Meghan McCain is allowed to speak to Whoopi Goldberg. Has nothing to do with the movie, but I think he's right.
But yes.
No, but I think it does. I think he's saying, like, look at this evidence that Meghan McCain should not be allowed to speak to Whoopi Goldberg on the grounds that she was in Sister Act.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Ben Crew gives it 3.5 stars and says, there's a list: gangster killings, Catholicism, a leak in the police department, Harvey Keitel. Call Sister Act what it really is, a Martin Scorsese film.
Let's say that.
Absolutely.
I'd love a Martin Scorsese directed Sister Act just for the gag of the moment.
This also like
Not
does explain
this movie, but
yeah, this like does explain why it is a top 3 movie for me, because like that is a description of a movie that I will absolutely love. Like those are the ingredients I need.
And then Heather gives it 3 stars and says, I want to smoke a joint with every single one of these nuns, starting with Kathy Najimy.
Absolutely.
For sure. Molly, what is our closer?
I do want to say that I had a different closer that I feel like is important to mention for the listeners, which is pitch the premise of Sister Act 3 because it is currently in development. They are making a
Right.
Sister Act 3.
Yes.
But as I was watching, I had a better idea, which is as Maggie Smith is bringing Whoopi Goldberg into the convent, she tells her the 3 vows that they have to take, which are poverty, chastity, and obedience. And I want everyone to rate those 3 in order of which would be the hardest for you to follow.
For like our own personal.
Your own personal human. What do you think would be the
Can I
easiest
ask
and
a
hardest
question?
vow to
Can
follow?
I ask a question about chastity?
Uh-huh.
Does that include self?
That includes self.
I truly
I mean, I don't know.
I think it does, but as I was trying to think through this question in anticipation, I was like, I feel like Catholic school tried really hard to give me very clear lines around sex, and I don't fully know what chastity encompasses for a nun. Like, I'm not totally sure.
I think it counts for the stakes.
That's yeah. We're raising the stakes.
Okay, but like, could you make out with someone if you were a nun?
No, I don't think so.
But making out's not inherently sexual. Well, it's lustful, but I don't think it's sexual.
But lust
But
as
is that
a deadly sin.
is that the line? I think I could hug someone if I was a nun, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
You
can
That
can like
hugs are fine.
hug, kiss, and
a side
But is
hug.
hug the line?
you like
A kiss on the
kiss
lips.
on the cheek. I think.
This is why. This
Okay.
is why media so often goes back to the trope of like a nun falling in love. Like I think this like happens
Because
a
there's
lot.
we don't know the rules. We
Right.
just
Yeah.
assume.
And it's like, how would you be able to control your emotions to that degree? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, like many people do it, but I also think for a long time, and I'm interested to see if there's ever like more discourse about like queer study of like people in the clergy. Obviously, there's been like discussion of like gay men becoming priests
For unfortunate reasons.
for unfortunate reasons and to sad effect at some points. But also I wonder if there is like maybe not necessarily lesbians, but like I mean, I'm sure there are lesbians who have become nuns because they felt that was more of a viable option for them to like be more honest and true or whatever. But also maybe people who are just more asexual in general and like don't really have like a desire to have that, just like see that as more of a option for themselves. I don't know. It would be interesting for someone to write.
Yes.
Molly.
I have a whole dissertation I'm about to turn it in. No, absolutely. I think that would be super fascinating to look into. But I want to know which of these would be hardest for you to follow on a personal level. Or what's easiest, what's hardest, do you think?
Obedience is easiest for me.
Interesting.
I think poverty is easiest for me.
That is you are out of your mind.
Wait, no. You're right. Wait, I'm thinking. I'm not. You're right. I think obedience is the easiest because I just am a very submissive person anyway. Like I'll just like
That's true.
agree to things.
It's definitely easier for you than it is for me. But of
Yes.
these 3, this is the easiest.
You think RJ was wrong because you think obedience would be so easy for him, or because you think poverty would be so hard for him?
Poverty would be hard.
I think poverty would be much harder for him than he is giving himself credit for at the moment.
Yeah,
And why is that?
but I think
Well, let's take a
Avoided
look at our
investment.
finances. Let me open up youneedabudget.com.
But I think out of all of the 3, I think chastity will be the hardest for me. Just because if I was in that situation as a nun,
Say that.
and it like me, who I am, was in the situation and already have like a very kind of conflicted priest thing. Like that's something that I have developed
Hot
in my sexual awakening.
Fleabag has ruined all of us.
Fleabag has absolutely ruined that for me because I was like, oh, this is like all of my repressed things that I felt in high school just are now real. So I think that would be very hard for me if there was, like a young seminarian that happened to join the convent for like a,
And the first part of the word is semen. My God.
come on.
My God.
And I also, since going to all boys Catholic schools or Jesuit schools, like I was always surrounded by like 20 something young priest seminarians.
Here's why I would say chastity would be hardest for me, because I think we have the same order, RJ. There is so much time to yourself where you have nothing to do.
That's true.
Oh my God. And you just wouldn't. What do I read? What do I read?
No, you pray.
Hot.
You
Oh!
I just rewatched Parks and Rec and the episode where they're complaining that the park's closed, and she's like, "It's about to be summer. What am I supposed to do with my children? Keep them in my house where I live?"
That energy.
Yeah.
Molly, yours?
I think I'm going to surprise you with this one, and maybe you're going to disagree with me. So I think poverty would be easiest for me, but here's my grounds, is that I feel like what is really stressful about poverty in real life is the uncertainty of it. And if you're in order, like you're like gonna be okay. You're gonna have a place to live, you're gonna have things to eat, you're gonna have medical care. So like your basics are taken care of. So I feel like the poverty stuff is more about like minimalism and just like not having a lavish lifestyle. And that to me is like what's most appealing about the concept of joining a religious order.
Yeah. What if you were like a working nun, if you're like the nun somewhere, then that might be harder. But like if you were in a convent, it's like everything.
Yes, I think if I were like in a like really closed off environment, I think I would do fine with that part of it.
Yeah.
I think obedience would be the hardest for me.
I agree.
You agree?
100%.
100%.
100%.
Because at first I thought maybe chastity, because for listeners, I don't date much. But I feel like, especially going through the pandemic, just the concept of like cutting yourself off from like human closeness is like so depressing.
Yeah.
But two, the obedience where like Maggie Smith is like, we're just gonna be quiet for the rest of the day. I cannot live a life where somebody could just like tell me that and I just have to live with that all the time. Like that one would be so hard, because it would be so present all the time. Like you never know when somebody's just gonna like give you an order that you have to follow.
Yeah, it's like you're doing a fast today, Molly.
I was about to say you would only be able to do it if you were the Reverend Mother, but then I remembered that like any man would then be able to like tell you what to do, and it would be the end. Goodbye. Done.
The end. Yeah. Oh man.
Any man in a robe could just come in here and say that we're doing something
bullshit
new.
He wanted to.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there like have been. I mean, there are definitely some like pretty feminist nuns that exist in the church, and I feel like there have even been some efforts to like kind of form convents, but like outside of the church, like for this reason, that like there's some cool stuff and like women living together communally, like supporting each other, whatever, that like people want to take from that, but it's like untenable in the real situation of being just like under the command of any man in the church can tell a nun what to do, basically. And so I just think that one would be not compatible with my personality.
Yeah, it's crazy because we live down the street from like the Cardinals mansion here in Chicago, and like we'll see sometimes like the nuns walking to and from like the carriage house into the mansion, and I just know that they're just like serving the cardinal, and it's almost like their staff. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Good for them.
Let women be priests.
Sister Act 3.
Sister Act 3, let women be priests.
There it is.
That's it. Sister Act 3, Father Act. Mother Act.
He may not be a movie star, but when he comes to being happy,
we are. That my favorite line in the favorite music line in the entire movie is, and I'm gonna.
There's not a thing to say that could take me away from my God.
Get a little shoulder action in there. There's not a thing
that could take me
away from my God.
Thank you for listening to the best revival of a podcast, Showgays. You can find us on social media. Adam is at Adam Noecker on Twitter. RJ is at RJ Food Rocks on Instagram. And Molly is at Molly Matiny on Instagram. This episode was edited and mixed by Adam Noecker. This has been an Ampliverse production. You can find our show page and more information at theampliverse.com. If you'd like to send us your own takes on the movie we just watched, reach out to us via email and we might read it aloud on the show. Our email is showgaysmoviemusical@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to help others find the show. And now, as always, the show must go on, so stick around to hear what we're going to be watching next episode.
Well, you wouldn't marry a fella like me anyway, would you?
Yes, I would. If I loved you. Why, wouldn't make any difference what you. Even if I died for it.
How do you know what you'd do if you loved me? How you'd feel, or anything?
I don't know how I'd know. But I know how it'd be if I loved you.
But you don't.
No, I don't.
But somehow I can see just exactly how I'd be if I loved you. Time and again I would try to say all I'd want you to know. If I loved you, words wouldn't come in an easy way. Round in circles I'd go, longing to tell you, but afraid and shy. I'd let my golden chances pass me by. Soon you'd leave me. Off you would go in the mist of day. Never, never to
Discovering voices, building worlds. The Ampliverse.